The security lights cast long shadows across the Lecky mansion compound as Thomas knelt on the concrete driveway, his back bent at an awkward angle as he scrubbed at an oil stain with a worn brush. His knees ached, his shoulders burned, and somewhere in the main house, he could hear laughter, the clinking of expensive glasses, the sound of a life he once knew but could no longer touch. "Thomas!" A sharp voice called from the service entrance. "Mr. Okonkwo wants the gate opened." "His guests are leaving." Thomas pushed himself to his feet, his joints protesting. He was only 37 years old, but some days he felt like 70. He jogged toward the massive iron gate, pressing the button that set the motor whirring. 3 gleaming SUVs rolled past him without acknowledgement, their occupants invisible behind tinted windows. He was invisible too, he had learned. Gatemen always were. But what those people in their luxury vehicles did not know, what nobody in the Okonkwo household knew, was that the man opening their gate had once stood before lecture halls filled with eager students, chalk dust on his fingers and complex equations flowing from his mind like poetry. They did not know that he had published 2 papers on computational mathematics before his 28th birthday. They did not know that he had been someone. That was before prison, before the accusation, before everything fell apart. To understand how Thomas Adewale ended up as a gateman in a billionaire's mansion, sleeping in a cramped boys' quarters and eating leftover food from the main house, we need to go back 5 years to a sunny Tuesday morning in Benin City when his life was completely different. If you're listening to this story and wondering what could bring a university lecturer to work as a gateman, make sure you subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications, because what happens next will shock you. Stories like Thomas's need to be heard. And your subscription helps us bring more true-life stories to light. Now, let's continue. Thomas Adewale had been the youngest lecturer in the Mathematics and Computer Science department at Midwest University. At 32, he was known for his patience with struggling students, his innovative teaching methods, and his genuine love for the abstract beauty of numbers. He was tall, slender, with warm brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses that gave him a perpetually thoughtful expression. Students joked that Dr. Adewale could make calculus feel like a conversation with an old friend. He lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Ugbowo, drove a 7-year-old Toyota Corolla, and spent his evenings either preparing lectures or playing chess at a small shop near his house. His life was simple, predictable, and satisfying. He had never imagined that satisfaction could be so fragile. Jennifer was a 3rd-year student in his differential equations class. She was 21, attractive, and struggling badly with the coursework. She had failed the first 2 tests and was facing the real possibility of repeating the course, which would delay her graduation. In March of that year, she started coming to Thomas's office hours regularly. Thomas treated her exactly as he treated every student who sought help, with patience, clear explanations, and encouragement. He kept his office door open during these sessions, as was his practice with all students. He maintained professional distance, never met students outside campus, and certainly never gave any indication of inappropriate interest. But Jennifer was failing, and as the semester progressed, her desperation grew. In late April, she came to his office with tears in her eyes, begging for extra credit assignments, for anything that might help her pass. Thomas felt genuine sympathy for her, but he also believed in academic integrity. He could not simply give her grades she had not earned. "Jennifer," he said gently that afternoon, "I can continue helping you understand the material, but I cannot manufacture grades. That would not be fair to you or to the other students." She had nodded, wiped her eyes, and left his office. Thomas thought nothing more of it. 3 days later, campus security came to his classroom in the middle of a lecture. The walk across campus to the Vice-Chancellor's office was one Thomas would replay in his mind 1,000 times during the years that followed. Students stared as the security men flanked him. Colleagues peered from office windows. By the time he reached the administrative building, His shirt was soaked with nervous sweat. In the Vice-Chancellor's office, Jennifer Okoro sat in a chair, her mother beside her, both women looking grave and tearful. The Vice-Chancellor, Professor Adesuwa Ogieva, was a stern woman in her 60s who had built her career on zero tolerance for scandal. "Dr. Adewale," she said, her voice cold, "Miss Okoro has made a very serious accusation against you." Thomas felt the floor tilt beneath him. "What accusation?" Jennifer would not meet his eyes. Her mother spoke instead, her voice shaking with rage. "You touched my daughter, inappropriately. You told her you would fail her unless she agreed to have sexual relations with you. You are a predator who abuses his position." The words hit Thomas like physical blows. "That is absolutely not true," he said, his voice rising with panic. "Jennifer, tell them the truth. I have never done anything like that. I have never even been alone with you in a closed room." But Jennifer just sat there, silent, crying into a handkerchief her mother had given her. The Vice-Chancellor held up her hand. "Dr. Adewale, you are suspended immediately pending a full investigation. You will surrender your staff ID and leave campus within the hour. The police have been notified." "The police?" Thomas felt like he was drowning. "This is insane. I have done nothing wrong. Check the CCTV cameras in the corridor. My door is always open. Ask any other student." "This is not true." But the Vice-Chancellor's face remained impassive. In the current climate, with universities under pressure to take allegations of sexual misconduct seriously, there would be no benefit of the doubt. Accusation was as good as guilt, especially when the accused was a man and the accuser a young woman with tears on her face. Thomas was escorted off campus that afternoon like a criminal. By evening, the news had spread through the university community like wildfire. By the next morning, it was on social media. Former students, people who had benefited from his teaching, now posted angry comments calling him disgusting, a monster, a disgrace. His phone rang constantly with calls from journalists. His landlord received visits from neighbors demanding that a rapist not be allowed to live in their building. His own family called, their voices tight with shock and confusion. His younger sister cried on the phone. His mother, a devout Christian who had raised him alone after his father's death, asked him in a trembling voice if the accusation was true. "Mummy, I swear on everything holy, I have never touched that girl inappropriately," Thomas said, tears streaming down his face as he sat alone in his apartment. "You raised me better than that. You know me." "I know," his mother said softly. "I know my son. But knowing and proving are different things." She was right. The investigation was swift and, in Thomas's view, deeply flawed. The university found no physical evidence of assault, because, of course, no assault had occurred. But Jennifer stuck to her story, adding details that made Thomas's blood run cold. She claimed he had called her to his office after hours. She claimed he had locked the door. She claimed he had made explicit threats about her grades while touching her inappropriately. None of it was true. But she told the story with enough emotion and detail that people believed her. Her friends came forward claiming she had confided in them weeks earlier. The university, eager to avoid scandal and lawsuits, decided it was simpler to sacrifice Thomas than to risk their reputation. Within 3 weeks of the accusation, Thomas was formally dismissed from his position. The case was referred to the police for criminal prosecution. His lawyer, a harried public defender with too many cases and too little time, advised him that fighting the charges would be expensive and difficult. "She has witnesses who say she told them about the harassment," the lawyer explained in his cramped office. "You have no witnesses because nothing happened. That is the problem with proving innocence. It is much harder than proving guilt." The trial, 6 months later, was a nightmare. Jennifer testified with trembling voice and genuine-seeming tears. Her mother testified about the change she had noticed in her daughter's behavior. Her friends testified about Jennifer's distress and fear. The prosecutor painted Thomas as a predator who had used his position of power to prey on a vulnerable student. Thomas's lawyer did his best, pointing out the lack of physical evidence, the open-door policy, the absence of any prior complaints in Thomas's decade of teaching. The judge, a woman who had made her name prosecuting gender-based violence cases, seemed to have decided Thomas's guilt before the trial even began. "The court finds the testimony of the complainant credible and compelling," she said on the day of sentencing, her voice ringing through the courtroom. "Sexual harassment and assault in our educational institutions must be met with the full force of the law. Thomas Adewale, you are hereby sentenced to 15 years imprisonment." Thomas heard his mother's scream from the gallery. He felt his legs give way. 15 years. More than a decade of his life, for a crime he did not commit, could never have imagined committing. The prison van that took him to Oko Medium Security Prison smelled of sweat and urine. The other prisoners, men accused or convicted of various crimes, eyed him with a mixture of curiosity and contempt. When they learned he was there for sexual assault, the contempt intensified. Even among criminals, there was a hierarchy of acceptable offences, and his was near the bottom. Oko Prison was overcrowded, underfunded, and brutal. Thomas was assigned to a cell meant for 6 men, but housing 14. The air was thick with body odour and despair. The food was barely edible. The guards were indifferent at best, sadistic at worst. Other inmates, learning of his conviction, treated him with violence. He was beaten twice in his first month, once so badly he lost a tooth and spent 3 days in the prison infirmary. But worse than the physical conditions was the psychological torture of knowing he was innocent. Every morning, Thomas woke on the thin mat that served as his bed and felt the crushing weight of injustice. He had dedicated his life to education, to helping young people understand complex concepts, to building their confidence and knowledge. And in return, a lie had destroyed everything he had built. He thought constantly about Jennifer Okoro. What had driven her to do this? Was it really just about grades? Had someone put her up to it? Did she feel any guilt at all? These questions tormented him more than the discomfort of the prison conditions. His mother visited when she could afford the transport fare, bringing food and tears. She had aged 10 years in 10 months, her face creased with grief and worry. His younger sister came once, then stopped, unable to bear seeing him in prison clothes, hollow-eyed and thin. Friends from his teaching days gradually stopped writing. The world moved on without him, and Thomas became just another number in an overcrowded prison system. He tried to maintain his sanity through mathematics. In his head, he worked through complex equations, designed imaginary algorithms, solved problems that required no pen or paper. The numbers were his refuge, the only thing that prison could not take from him. 2 years passed with agonizing slowness. Thomas learned to avoid trouble, to keep his head down, to navigate the complex social dynamics of prison life. He made no friends because trust was impossible in that place. He simply endured, day after day, counting down the years that stretched impossibly ahead of him. Then, on a Tuesday morning in September, 2 years and 4 months into his sentence, a prison guard came to his cell with an unusual expression on his face. "Adewale," the guard said, "pack your things. You are being released." Thomas stared at him, certain he had misheard. "Released? Some woman confessed that she lied about you. Case is being reviewed. You are going home today." The other inmates in the cell erupted in noise, some celebrating, others jeering. Thomas felt like he was moving through water as he gathered his few possessions. A Bible his mother had brought, a photo of his family, the glasses he had somehow managed to keep intact. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold anything. The processing took hours, bureaucracy grinding slowly even for a wrongfully imprisoned man. Finally, at 4 in the afternoon, Thomas walked out of Oko Prison a free man. His mother was waiting outside the gate, and when she saw him, she collapsed to her knees, sobbing. Later that evening, in his mother's small flat in Benin City, Thomas learned the full story. Jennifer Okoro had joined a Pentecostal church 6 months earlier, part of a campus ministry that emphasized confession and repentance. During a particularly emotional service, overwhelmed with conviction about her sins, she had confessed to the pastor that she had falsely accused a lecturer of sexual assault because she was failing his course, and panicked. The pastor, to his credit, had immediately taken the information to the police. Jennifer had made a formal statement, recanting her entire testimony. She admitted she had lied, that Thomas had never touched her inappropriately, that she had fabricated the entire story because she was desperate to pass the course and angry that he would not help her cheat. The legal system, which had moved so swiftly to convict Thomas, moved much more slowly to exonerate him. It took another 2 months of bureaucratic wrangling before his conviction was formally overturned and his record cleared. By the time that happened, Thomas had already learned the bitter truth about being accused of sexual assault. Even when proven innocent, the stain never fully washes away. He went back to Midwest University, hoping to reclaim his position. The vice-chancellor, now a different person from the one who had fired him, received him in her office with obvious discomfort. "Dr. Adewale," she said, not quite meeting his eyes. "We are of course relieved that this terrible injustice has been corrected. However, regarding your employment here, the situation is complex." "Complex?" Thomas felt anger rising in his chest. "I was wrongfully imprisoned. I lost 2 years of my life. What is complex about giving me back my job?" The vice-chancellor shifted in her chair. "You must understand, there was tremendous publicity around this case. Many students and parents still associate your name with the original accusation. Even though you have been exonerated, having you return to teach could create tension and discomfort in the academic community." Thomas stood up, his voice shaking. "So I was accused falsely, imprisoned unjustly, and now you are telling me I still cannot work because people might feel uncomfortable. Where is the justice in that?" "I am sorry," she said, and she did sound genuinely regretful. "I wish things were different. We can provide you with a reference letter stating that you were wrongfully accused, but we cannot reinstate you at this time." Thomas applied to 17 universities over the following months. Each one expressed sympathy, acknowledged the injustice he had suffered, and ultimately declined to hire him. Some were blunt. "Our institution cannot risk the controversy." Others were diplomatic. "We have no positions available at this time." The result was the same. His savings, never substantial to begin with, were gone. The 2 years in prison had left him with nothing. His mother was struggling herself, living on a small pension. His sister had her own family to support. Thomas found himself, at 34 years old, with a PhD in mathematics, over a decade of teaching experience, and 2 published papers, unable to find work in his field. He tried tutoring privately, but parents were wary. Even with his exoneration, the stigma clung to him. When they Googled his name, the old news articles about his arrest appeared before the smaller articles about his release. People remembered the accusation more vividly than the retraction. Desperation drove him to apply for any job, regardless of field. Shop assistant, data entry clerk, administrative assistant. Most employers did background checks. When they saw the criminal record, even one marked conviction overturned, they moved on to other candidates. The gap in his employment history raised questions he could not answer without telling the whole humiliating story. Finally, after 8 months of unemployment and increasing desperation, Thomas saw an advertisement in a newspaper. Security guard needed for residential property in Lekki, Lagos. Room and board provided. It was not what he had trained for, not what he had dreamed of, but it was something. He called the number. The interview was conducted by Mrs. Okonkwo, the billionaire's wife. She was a fashionable woman, in her early 40s, dripping with gold jewelry, her expression suggesting she found the interview process tedious. "What is your name?" she asked without looking up from her phone. Thomas Adewale, ma. Where are you from? Edo State, ma. Can you open and close a gate? Yes, ma. Can you follow instructions without asking unnecessary questions? Yes, ma. She looked up at him for the first time, her gaze appraising and dismissive. The pay is 70,000 naira per month. You will live in the boys' quarters. You will not speak to my children unless spoken to. You will not enter the main house without permission. You will keep the compound clean and secure. Do you understand? Thomas swallowed his pride, his education, his sense of self. Yes, ma, I understand. Start on Monday. And so Thomas Adewale, PhD in mathematics, former university lecturer, published researcher, became a gateman in the Lekki mansion of Chief Emeka Okonkwo, one of Nigeria's wealthiest businessmen. The boys' quarters he was assigned was a small concrete room with a narrow bed, a single bulb hanging from the ceiling, and a small window that looked out onto the service area. He shared a bathroom with the cook and the gardener. The work itself was not difficult. Open the gate when the family or their guests arrived. Close it behind them. Keep the driveway clean. Water the plants in the front compound. Respond immediately when called. The hard part was the invisibility, the casual disrespect, the constant reminder that he was now at the bottom of the social hierarchy. The Okonkwo family barely acknowledged his existence. Chief Okonkwo, a large man in his 50s who had made his fortune in oil and gas, strode past Thomas daily without a glance. Mrs. Okonkwo issued orders in the tone one might use with a particularly slow pet. The twin boys, 17-year-old Gabriel and 15-year-old Samuel, treated Thomas like furniture. Only the youngest child, 12-year-old Ada, sometimes said good morning to him, her voice soft and hesitant, as if unsure whether gatemen were allowed to be greeted. Before we continue with what happens next, I want to ask you to do something. If this story is touching you, if you are feeling something for Thomas and his situation, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like this need to be shared, and your subscription helps us reach more people. Now, let us get back to the story. The other staff members at the Okonkwo mansion treated Thomas with mild curiosity initially, then indifference. The cook, a middle-aged woman named Blessing, was friendly enough, sometimes saving extra food for him. The gardener, Musa, was quiet and kept to himself. The driver, Chidi, was arrogant, convinced that his proximity to the wealthy family elevated his own status. Thomas tried to make the best of his situation. He sent most of his salary to his mother. He kept his small room meticulously clean. In the evenings, alone in his quarters, he worked through mathematics problems in a worn notebook, the only connection remaining to his former life. He had bought the notebook with his first month's salary, a small act of defiance against the death of his identity. 6 months into his employment, Thomas had perfected the art of being invisible. He opened gates without being asked. He cleaned without being reminded. He stood in the hot sun or the pouring rain without complaint. He had learned that the key to surviving as a gateman was to anticipate needs before they were voiced, to be present but unnoticed, to accept humiliation with a blank face. It was a Saturday afternoon in March when everything changed. Thomas was trimming the hedge near the front of the house, moving methodically along the greenery with a pair of old shears. The children were supposed to be inside studying for their exams, which were just weeks away. Chief Okonkwo had hired an expensive home tutor who came 3 times a week, but the boys were struggling, particularly Gabriel, who was weak in mathematics. Thomas heard voices raised in frustration coming from the open window of the boys' study room. He glanced up briefly, then returned to his work. It was not his business. Nothing that happened in the main house was his business. "I do not understand this." Gabriel's voice carried clearly through the window. "How am I supposed to solve for x when there are all these fractions?" "You need to find the common denominator first," another voice responded. "That would be Ada, the youngest child." Thomas had noticed that she was often in the study room with her brothers, though she was years younger and still in primary school. "I do not need a primary school girl trying to teach me mathematics," Gabriel snapped. "Where is that useless tutor? He is supposed to be here by now. He called to say he cannot come today." Ada's voice was small, hurt by her brother's tone. "I was just trying to help." "Well, you are not helping. You are making me more confused." Thomas should have kept working. He should have stayed in his lane, remained invisible. But something about Ada's hurt voice, combined with hearing mathematical concepts being discussed incorrectly, made him pause. His old instincts as a teacher stirred. Those impulses that 2 years in prison and 8 months as a gateman had not entirely killed. He moved closer to the window, not intending to interfere, just curious about what mathematical problem was causing such frustration. Through the decorative ironwork that covered the window, he could see Gabriel hunched over a desk, papers scattered around him, his face creased with frustration. Ada stood nearby, holding a textbook, looking like she wanted to help, but did not dare speak again. On the paper in front of Gabriel, Thomas could see an algebraic equation. It was actually not that complicated. A basic rational equation that required finding a common denominator and then solving for the variable. Thomas could solve it in his head in about 10 seconds. He watched as Gabriel tried various incorrect approaches, crossing out work, starting over, getting more frustrated by the minute. "This is impossible," Gabriel said, throwing his pen down. "I am going to fail. Mathematics. And Daddy is going to kill me." Thomas knew he should walk away. He knew that Gateman did not involve themselves in the family's private affairs. But he also knew, with the certainty of someone who had spent years teaching, exactly what Gabriel was doing wrong and exactly how to fix it. Almost without thinking, Thomas set down his head shears and stepped closer to the window. Gabriel jumped, startled. Both he and Ada turned toward the window with expressions of surprise. It was probably the first time the gateman had spoken to them without being addressed first. "What do you want?" Gabriel asked, his tone automatic dismissal. Thomas hesitated, suddenly aware of how presumptuous this was, how easily it could go wrong. But Ada was looking at him with curious eyes, and Gabriel's paper was right there, the mistakes so obvious to Thomas's trained eye. "I could not help overhearing," Thomas said carefully. "The problem you are working on, you need to first factor the denominators. Then find the least common multiple before you can add the fractions together. Once you do that, the rest will be simple." Gabriel stared at him. "What?" "The denominators," Thomas said, warming to the subject despite himself. "You have x plus 3 and x minus 2. Those are your denominators. To add fractions, you need a common denominator, which in this case would be the product of both. So x squared plus x minus 6. Then you can combine the numerators." Gabriel looked down at his paper, then back at Thomas. Thomas realized he had said too much, revealed too much. He started to back away. "I apologize. I was out of line. I should get back to work." But Ada spoke up, her voice excited. "Wait! Can you show us? Can you explain it properly?" "Ada, he is the gateman," Gabriel said. But there was uncertainty in his voice now, curiosity mixed with confusion. "I do not care if he is the gateman," Ada said with a determination that reminded Thomas of the brightest students he used to teach. "He obviously knows mathematics. Our tutor is not here, and you do not understand the work. Let him help." Gabriel looked torn between pride and desperation. The desperation won. "Fine," he said grudgingly. "Come to the window and explain it." For the next 20 minutes, Thomas stood outside the window and walked Gabriel through the problem step by step. As he explained, falling into the familiar rhythm of teaching, he watched Gabriel's face change from confusion to understanding. Ada listened intently, asking occasional questions that showed she was following the logic even better than her older brother. So the final answer is x equals 5, Gabriel asked, writing down the solution. Exactly, Thomas confirmed. You can check it by substituting 5 back into the original equation. It should work on both sides. Gabriel did the calculation, and his eyes widened when the equation balanced. It works! It actually works! He looked up at Thomas with an expression that was entirely new. Respect. How did you know how to do that? Thomas chose his words carefully. I studied mathematics at university, sir. You have a degree in mathematics and you work as a gateman? Gabriel asked, his tone suggesting he thought Thomas was lying. Sometimes life does not go as planned, Thomas said simply. Before the conversation could continue, they heard footsteps in the corridor outside the study room. A moment later, Chief Okonkwo appeared in the doorway, his large frame filling the space. He had come home early from a golf game and was still wearing his golf clothes. Gabriel. I thought you were supposed to be studying, Chief Okonkwo said, his voice carrying the automatic sternness of a father who expected his children to be working hard. I am, Daddy, Gabriel said quickly. The gateman was helping me with my mathematics homework. Chief Okonkwo's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, disbelief, and then a frown. He walked to the window and looked out at Thomas, who immediately lowered his eyes and took a step back. The gateman? Chief Okonkwo repeated. Yes, sir, Gabriel said, and there was enthusiasm in his voice now. He explained rational equations to me better than Mr. Adeleke ever has. He really understands mathematics, Daddy. Chief Okonkwo studied Thomas through the window for a long moment. Thomas kept his eyes down, waiting for the reprimand, for the reminder to stay in his place, possibly even for termination. Who did he think he was? A mere gateman trying to teach the boss's son. But the reprimand did not come. Instead, Chief Okonkwo said something that surprised everyone. Come inside. Come into the house. Thomas looked up sharply. Sir, you heard me. Come inside. Use the side entrance. Go to the study room. Thomas's heart was pounding as he walked around the house to the side entrance, a door he had never been permitted to use before. A housegirl met him there, looking confused about why the gateman was being allowed into the main house. She led him down a wide corridor with marble floors and expensive artwork on the walls, a world he had glimpsed from outside but never entered. The study room was large and well-appointed, with built-in bookshelves, a large desk, comfortable chairs, and air conditioning that made the room pleasantly cool after the heat outside. Gabriel and Ada sat at the desk, papers spread around them. Chief Okonkwo stood by the window, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Sit down, Chief Okonkwo said, gesturing to a chair. Thomas sat, feeling acutely aware of his work clothes, the sweat stains on his shirt, the dust on his shoes. He kept his hands folded in his lap, unsure what was about to happen. Gabriel tells me you helped him with his mathematics, Chief Okonkwo began. Yes, sir. I apologize if I overstepped. I heard him struggling and I thought. Chief Okonkwo held up a hand. I am not angry. I am curious. You said you studied mathematics at university. What degree do you have? Thomas hesitated. This was the moment where his past would either help or hurt him. I have a PhD in mathematics and computer science from Midwest University, sir. The room went silent. Gabriel's mouth fell open. Even Ada looked shocked. Chief Okonkwo's eyebrows rose nearly to his hairline. A PhD, Chief Okonkwo repeated slowly. And you are working as my gateman. Yes, sir. Why? Thomas took a deep breath. This was the conversation he had dreaded, the story he hated telling, but there was no avoiding it now. It is a long story, sir. I have time, Chief Okonkwo said, settling into a chair opposite Thomas. Tell me the whole thing. Leave nothing out. So Thomas told his story. He started with his years as a lecturer, his love for teaching, his research work. He explained about Jennifer, her failing grades, her desperation. He described the accusation, the swift judgment, the trial. His voice remained steady as he recounted the 2 years in prison, though his hands tightened in his lap when he mentioned the beatings, the humiliation, the crushing weight of being innocent but imprisoned. He told them about Jennifer's confession, about his exoneration that came too late to save his career. He explained about the 17 universities that would not hire him, the tutoring jobs he could not get, the stigma that followed him despite his innocence. He explained, finally, how he ended up in Lekki, answering an advertisement for a gateman because he had no other options and a mother to support. When he finished, Gabriel and Ada were staring at him with expressions of horror and sympathy. Chief Okonkwo sat very still, his face grave. "Show me your credentials," Chief Okonkwo said finally. "Your certificates, your publications, your exoneration papers. Bring them to me tomorrow." "Yes, sir," Thomas said, though he wondered what purpose this would serve. What difference did credentials make? He was still a gateman, still marked by scandal, still unable to reclaim his former life. Chief Okonkwo stood, signaling the conversation was over. Thomas started to rise, but the billionaire held up a hand. "Before you go, show Gabriel how to solve the rest of those problems. You have already started, you might as well finish. I will have someone bring you some water." For the next hour, Thomas sat in the air-conditioned study room, working through mathematics problems with Gabriel and Ada. Their initial skepticism had completely vanished. Replaced by eager attention, they asked questions, worked through example problems, and Thomas found himself slipping back into his old teaching persona, patient and clear in his explanations. When they finally finished, Gabriel looked up at Thomas with genuine gratitude. "Thank you, sir. I understand it now. I really understand it." Ada nodded enthusiastically. "You are a much better teacher than Mr. Adeleke." Thomas smiled despite himself. "Mr. Adeleke is probably a fine teacher. Sometimes you just need to hear something explained in a different way." That evening, back in his small room in the boys' quarters, Thomas allowed himself to feel something he had not felt in years: hope. He did not know what Chief Okonkwo planned to do with his credentials, did not dare imagine that anything substantial would change. But for one afternoon, he had been Dr. Adewale again, not just Thomas the Gateman. And that feeling, that reconnection to who he once was, felt like water in a desert. The next morning, Thomas brought his credentials to the main house as instructed. He had kept them all these years in a sealed plastic folder, protecting them like precious artifacts from a lost civilization. His PhD certificate from Midwest University, his undergraduate transcripts showing first-class honors, copies of his 2 published papers on computational algorithms, letters of recommendation from his former department heads, and finally, the official court document stating that his conviction had been overturned, that Jennifer Okoro had confessed to making false allegations. Chief Okonkwo reviewed each document carefully, reading through everything with the focused attention of a man who had built a business empire by paying attention to details. When he finished, he looked up at Thomas with an expression that was hard to read. "Thomas," he said, and it was the first time the billionaire had used his name, rather than just calling him Gateman, or, "You there. Do you know what I do for a living?" "You are in oil and gas, sir." "Partly. But my main business interests are now in education. I own a chain of private schools across Lagos, Abuja, and Port Harcourt. 14 schools in total, from nursery through secondary. I also have partnerships with 2 universities, helping to develop their business and technology programs." Thomas did not know where this was going, but he felt his heart begin to beat faster. Chief Okonkwo continued, "My flagship school is Crown Academy in Ikoyi. It is one of the most expensive secondary schools in Nigeria, serving children of politicians, business leaders, diplomats. We pride ourselves on academic excellence, particularly in the sciences and mathematics." "Do you know what our biggest problem is right now?" Thomas shook his head. finding qualified, passionate mathematics and computer science teachers. We pay well, very well, but good teachers are scarce. Most young people with strong mathematics backgrounds go into banking or tech companies. Teaching pays less and has lower prestige, so we struggle to find educators who truly love the subject and can inspire students. Chief Okonkwo stood up, walking to the window that overlooked his compound. Yesterday, I watched you teach my children for an hour. I saw how you explained concepts, how you made complex ideas accessible, how you encouraged them to think rather than just memorize. That is real teaching. That is what I want in my schools. He turned back to face Thomas. But before I can offer you anything, I need to understand something. The documents show you were exonerated, that the girl confessed to lying. But I need to hear from you. Are you truly innocent? Because if I bring you into my organization, into contact with hundreds of children, I need absolute certainty. Thomas met Chief Okonkwo's eyes directly. Sir, I swear on everything I hold sacred, I am innocent. I have never in my life touched a student inappropriately. I have never used my position as a teacher to take advantage of anyone. What Jennifer did to me destroyed my life, but it did not change who I am. I am a teacher. That is who I have always been, and even 2 years in prison could not take that away from me. Chief Okonkwo studied his face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I believe you. I have built my businesses by learning to read people, and I believe you. He returned to his desk and picked up his phone, dialing a number. Mrs. Adeyemi, he said when someone answered. This is Chief Okonkwo. I need you to run a complete background check on someone. Thomas Adewale. Send me everything you find, and I mean everything. I need it by end of business tomorrow. When he hung up, he looked at Thomas. I am going to verify your story thoroughly. If everything checks out as you have told it, I have a proposition for you. My education company needs a new academic director for mathematics and computer science across all our schools. This person would oversee curriculum development, train teachers, visit schools to evaluate programs, and occasionally teach demonstration classes. The salary is 5 million naira per year, plus housing allowance, car allowance, and health insurance. Thomas felt dizzy. 5 million naira. That was more than he had earned as a university lecturer, more money than he had seen in years. But more than the money, it was the title, academic director, recognition, purpose, a return to his field. Why would you do this for me? Thomas asked, his voice barely above a whisper. You do not know me. I have been your gateman for less than a year. Chief Okonkwo smiled slightly. I am a businessman, Thomas. This is not charity. You have skills I need, experience that is valuable to my organization. But I will also tell you this. I built my fortune from nothing. My father was a bus driver. I put myself through school working as a houseboy for a wealthy family in Victoria Island. I know what it means to be invisible, to be dismissed because of your current circumstances rather than your potential. He paused, his expression becoming more serious. I also know about injustice. My older brother spent 4 years in prison for a crime he did not commit. Armed robbery. The real thieves had used his name when they were caught. By the time the truth came out and he was released, his health was destroyed. He died 6 months after getting out. I know what false accusations can do to an innocent person. I know how society can discard someone based on lies. Thomas felt tears prick his eyes. He blinked them back, trying to maintain composure. Chief Okonkwo continued. If the background check confirms your story, we will proceed. In the meantime, you will continue as gateman. I do not want anyone to know about this until everything is verified and finalized. Can you be patient a bit longer? Yes, sir, Thomas said. I have learned patience. The next 36 hours were the longest of Thomas's life. He went about his duties as gateman, opening and closing the gate, cleaning the driveway, watering plants, but inside, his mind was spinning with possibilities, with hope and terror in equal measure. What if the background check revealed something that made Chief Okonkwo change his mind? What if this was just a cruel tease before disappointment? On Tuesday evening, Chief Okonkwo's driver came to Thomas's quarters. "Chief wants to see you in his study." Now, Thomas followed the driver to the main house, his heart pounding. He was led to Chief Okonkwo's private study, a room he had never seen before, lined with books and dominated by a massive mahogany desk. Chief Okonkwo sat behind the desk, a thick folder open in front of him. "Sit down, Thomas," Chief Okonkwo said. Thomas sat, trying to read the billionaire's expression, and failing. "The background check came back," Chief Okonkwo said. "My investigator was very thorough. She spoke to your former colleagues at Midwest University, to the prosecutor who tried your case, to the judge who sentenced you, to the pastor who took Jennifer's confession, and to Jennifer herself." Thomas's stomach clenched. The investigator had spoken to Jennifer. Jennifer is now married, living in Abuja. She is still very active in her church. When my investigator contacted her, she broke down crying. She said that what she did to you haunts her every day, that she has prayed for your forgiveness but has been too ashamed to contact you directly. She provided a written statement, signed and notarized, repeating her confession and expressing remorse. Chief Okonkwo closed the folder. "Everyone my investigator spoke to, except the prosecutor who was simply doing his job, expressed regret about what happened to you. Your former department head called you one of the most talented young mathematicians he had ever worked with. The judge said that if she had known the full truth, she would never have convicted you. You were telling me the truth, Thomas. Every word." Thomas could not speak. He just nodded. "Starting Monday, you will report to the head office of Crown Educational Services as the new academic director for mathematics and computer science. Human Resources will handle all the paperwork. You will receive 3 months' salary in advance to help you get settled in proper accommodation. The company will also provide you with a car and driver for official duties." Thomas found his voice. "Thank you, sir. Thank you. I do not have words to express." Chief Okonkwo held up his hand. "Do not thank me yet. This job will be hard work. You will be managing curriculum across 14 schools, training teachers who may resist your methods, dealing with parents who pay huge fees and expect results. I am not giving you this position out of pity. I am giving it to you because I think you can excel at it. Prove me right." "I will, sir. I promise you I will. I know you will. Now, there is one more thing." Chief Okonkwo opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out another document. "My legal team has prepared a lawsuit against Jennifer for damages related to your false imprisonment. We can pursue compensation for lost wages, emotional distress, and damage to your career. The case would be strong given her written confession." Thomas was quiet for a moment, thinking about Jennifer crying on the phone to an investigator. Haunted by what she had done, he thought about the young, desperate student she had been, panicking about failing a course. He thought about the woman she was now, married, and trying to live with her guilt. "No," Thomas said finally. "I do not want to sue her. What she did was terrible and it cost me years of my life. But she was a frightened young woman who made a catastrophic mistake. She has to live with that guilt, and that is punishment enough. I do not want to build my new life on her continued suffering." Chief Okonkwo looked at Thomas for a long moment, then smiled. "That response tells me everything I need to know about your character. You are going to be an excellent addition to my organization." The following weeks moved with dreamlike speed. The other staff members were shocked to learn about his new position, shocked that the quiet Gateman they had barely noticed was actually a PhD holder and would soon be earning more than any of them. Blessing the cook hugged him and cried. "God is faithful," she kept saying. "God is so faithful." Even Chidi, the arrogant driver, looked at Thomas with new respect, though it was mixed with confusion about how the social order had been so dramatically upended. Gabriel and Ada were excited. "Can you still help me with my mathematics?" Gabriel asked. "Even when you are a big director?" "Of course," Thomas promised. "Anytime you need help, just call me." On his last day as Gateman, Chief Okonkwo did something unexpected. He called all the household staff together in the compound and addressed them with Thomas standing beside him. "I want you all to learn something from Thomas's story," Chief Okonkwo said. "You never know who the person standing next to you really is. You never know what they have overcome, or what they are capable of. Thomas worked here for months as a gateman, and most of you barely spoke to him. You saw his current position, not his potential or his past. That is a mistake many people make." He turned to Thomas. "Your experience here as gateman, seeing how people with power treat those they consider beneath them, will make you a better manager. You will remember what it feels like to be invisible, and you will treat your subordinates with the dignity everyone deserves." Thomas nodded, understanding the lesson. His time as a gateman had not been wasted. It had taught him empathy in a way that years of privilege could never have done. On Monday morning, Thomas walked into the Crown Educational Services headquarters in Victoria Island, wearing a new suit, carrying a new briefcase, driving his new company car. The receptionist greeted him with professional courtesy. The HR manager walked him through orientation. By afternoon, he was sitting in a conference room with the heads of all 14 schools, introducing himself and outlining his vision for improving mathematics and computer science education across the organization. Some of the school heads were skeptical at first. Who was this new academic director? Where had he come from? But when Thomas began discussing curriculum development, pedagogical approaches, and innovative teaching methods, speaking with the confidence of someone who truly understood his subject, their skepticism began to fade. Within 3 months, Thomas had restructured the mathematics curriculum across all Crown schools, introduced new teacher training programs, and personally conducted demonstration classes that showed teachers how to make abstract concepts accessible to students. Test scores began to improve. Teachers began to request his guidance. Parents noticed their children coming home excited about mathematics, a subject that had previously caused tears and frustration. Chief Okonkwo called Thomas to his office 6 months into his new role. "The board is very pleased with your work," he said. "Applications to our schools have increased because parents are hearing about our strong mathematics program. Several of our students won awards in the National Mathematics Competition. You are making a real difference." "Thank you, sir. I am just doing what I love. I want you to start thinking bigger," Chief Okonkwo said. "We are planning to open a new university focused on technology and engineering. I want you to head up the mathematics and computer science departments. You would be designing programs from the ground up, hiring faculty, setting academic standards." "Interested?" Thomas smiled. 2 years ago, he had been in prison, innocent but convicted, his career destroyed and his future non-existent. 1 year ago, he had been opening gates for people who looked through him like he was invisible. Now he was being asked to build university departments, to shape the education of future generations. "Very interested, sir." That evening, Thomas drove to Benin City to visit his mother. She was in the small flat he had recently rented for her, much nicer than where she had been living before, with proper plumbing and reliable electricity. When she opened the door and saw him standing there in his suit, coming from his important job, driving his company car, she burst into tears. "My son," she said, pulling him into a hug. "Look at how God has restored you. Look at how he has vindicated you." Thomas hugged her back, feeling the frailness of her body, the strength of her love. "Mummy, I could not have survived without you. When everyone else believed I was guilty, you knew I was innocent. When I wanted to give up in prison, your visits kept me alive. This restoration is not just mine. It is yours too." They sat together in her living room, drinking tea. And Thomas told her about the university project, about the schools, about Gabriel and Ada, and how teaching them had started everything. His mother listened with pride shining in her eyes. "Do you ever think about that girl?" she asked quietly. "The one who accused you?" Thomas was silent for a moment. "Sometimes. I used to think about her constantly in prison, wondering why she did it, hating her. But now, I mostly feel sorry for her. She made a terrible mistake when she was young and scared. She has to live with that for the rest of her life. I got my vindication, my second chance. I do not know if she will ever fully forgive herself." "You have a good heart," his mother said, patting his hand. "That is why you will succeed in this new position. Not just because you are intelligent, but because you remember what it means to suffer unjustly. You will be kind to your students, patient with their struggles. You will see them as human beings, not just test scores." She was right. When Thomas eventually stood before his first class at the new Crown Technology University, looking out at the faces of eager students, he remembered Jennifer. Not with bitterness, but with understanding. These students in front of him were human, capable of greatness and of mistakes. His job was not just to teach them mathematics, but to help them become people who would use their knowledge ethically, who would think carefully about consequences, who would have the courage to tell the truth, even when it was difficult. "Welcome to computational mathematics," Thomas said to that first class, his voice strong and confident. "Over the next semester, we are going to explore beautiful and powerful concepts together. Some of you will find this material challenging. That is okay. Struggle is how we learn. What matters is that you never give up, that you ask for help when you need it, and that you remember that every problem, no matter how complex, can be solved if you approach it with patience and clear thinking." As he began to write equations on the board, Thomas felt complete in a way he had not felt since before the accusation, before the trial, before prison. He was home, not in a physical location, but in his purpose, his calling, his identity as an educator. The years of suffering had not been meaningless. They had refined him, tested him, and ultimately proven that his commitment to teaching was not dependent on status or recognition. He would have been a teacher even if opportunity had never come, working through problems alone in his small room in the boys' quarters, keeping his mind sharp, refusing to let his gifts die. But opportunity had come, in the unlikely form of a billionaire who looked past the gateman's uniform to see the scholar underneath. Chief Okonkwo had given Thomas a second chance, but more than that, he had given him dignity. He had listened to Thomas's story, believed in his innocence, and trusted him with responsibility. In doing so, he had restored not just Thomas's career, but his faith in the possibility of justice, even when it came late. Years later, when Thomas became the Vice-Chancellor of Crown Technology University, one of the fastest-growing private universities, he never forgot where he had come from. He instituted policies protecting faculty members from false accusations, ensuring thorough investigations before any action was taken. He created second-chance programs for people who had been wrongfully convicted, helping them get education and employment. He personally mentored students from disadvantaged backgrounds, seeing potential where others saw only current circumstances. And every year, on the anniversary of the day he walked out of prison, Thomas took the day off. He drove back to Benin City, to the church where Jennifer had confessed her lies, and he lit a candle, not for himself, but for everyone trapped by false accusations, by injustice, by circumstances beyond their control. He prayed for their vindication, their restoration, their second chances. Because Thomas knew, better than most, that life could take everything from you in an instant based on a lie. But he also knew that redemption was possible, that truth could emerge even from the deepest darkness, that a man reduced to opening gates for wealthy strangers could rise again to become someone who opened doors of opportunity for others. The gateman who taught mathematics had become the vice-chancellor who transformed lives. And in that transformation was a story that reminded everyone who heard it that human potential cannot be measured by current circumstances, that dignity resides not in social position but in character, and that sometimes the most unlikely encounters, a billionaire overhearing his gateman explaining equations through a window, can change the trajectory of a life forever. Thomas Adewale's story did not end with bitterness or victimhood. It ended with purpose, with contribution, with the quiet satisfaction of knowing that he had survived the worst that life could throw at him and emerged not broken, but refined. The years could not be given back. The suffering could not be erased, but it could be transformed into wisdom, into empathy, into a commitment to ensure that other people's potential would not be wasted because of false judgments or hasty conclusions. And that, perhaps, was the greatest victory of all. Do you enjoy stories like this? Please subscribe for more and tell us in the comments what you like most about the story.